The first thing most people notice about ants is movement. A thin line crossing a pavement crack, a sudden swirl of tiny bodies around a crumb, a restless energy that seems almost mechanical from above. It is easy to see them as background noise, small, numerous, and interchangeable. Yet if we slow down long enough to look closely, the impression begins to shift. What appears chaotic at first resolves into patterns, and those patterns hint at something much larger than any individual insect. Beneath ordinary ground, within soil that feels still to human footsteps, exists a form of life that operates more like a quiet civilization than a collection of separate creatures. Ants are among the most successful organisms the planet has ever produced, not because of strength or size, but because of cooperation extended across immense spans of time. Scientists estimate that ants may account for a significant portion of the total biomass of terrestrial animals. If every ant were gathered and weighed together, their combined mass would rival that of humanity itself. This fact is easy to overlook precisely because ants are so small. They're distributed everywhere, across forests, deserts, grasslands, cities, blending into environments so seamlessly that they rarely draw sustained attention. Their success does not depend on dominance in a dramatic sense. It relies instead on persistence, repetition, and the quiet accumulation of countless small actions. Imagine standing on a familiar street corner. The ground seems ordinary, textured by grains of sand and fragments of leaf. But within that narrow strip of soil, beneath a slab of concrete warmed by sunlight, thousands of ants may be moving through tunnels invisible to the eye. Each one follows signals left by others, pausing only briefly before continuing. From a distance, the line appears steady and uninterrupted, but up close it reveals subtle adjustments. Tiny hesitations, brief contacts, antennae brushing, together in quick exchanges that carry more information than we might expect. There is no overseer directing traffic, no single ant aware of the entire system. Yet the flow persists, organized through interactions so small they almost escape notice. The scale of ant life becomes even more striking when viewed beyond human environments. In tropical forests, columns of leafcutter ants stretch across the forest floor like moving ribbons of green. Each ant carries a fragment of leaf far larger than its own body, forming a procession that can last for hours. These leaves are not eaten directly. Instead, they are transported underground to cultivate fungus gardens, living farms that have existed for millions of years. In deserts, solitary workers venture across open sand under the intense heat of the sun, navigating with remarkable precision despite the absence of landmarks. Their journeys appear random from afar, yet each turn reflects calculations made through the position of the sun and the counting of steps. Ants thrive in places that seem unlikely: cracks in dry pavement, the shaded edges of riverbanks, the roots of ancient trees, the interiors of fallen branches slowly returning to soil. Some species build nests high in the canopy, weaving leaves together with silk produced by their own larvae. Others dig downward into the earth, creating chambers arranged according to temperature and humidity. The variety of habitats they occupy is vast, yet their presence remains subtle. Unlike larger animals, ants rarely announce themselves loudly. Their influence spreads gradually, shaping ecosystems in ways that are easy to miss until one begins to look closely. To observe ants carefully is to notice how the ordinary becomes layered with hidden activity. A trail across a sidewalk is not merely a line but a temporary road formed through chemistry. Invisible pheromones guide each worker forward, creating a map that exists only for as long as it is reinforced. If a path, becomes inefficient, it fades quietly as fewer ants follow it. The colony adapts continuously, rewriting its routes without debate or instruction. These adjustments occur minute by minute, shaped by the success or failure of individual journeys. Over time, the collective behavior produces solutions that resemble planning, even though no single ant holds a plan in mind. This decentralized organization challenges the way humans often think about intelligence. We tend to imagine complex systems requiring leaders or central coordination. Ant colonies function differently. They rely on local interactions, brief exchanges between individuals, to generate large-scale patterns. When a worker discovers food, it returns to the nest, leaving a chemical trail. Other ants follow that trail, strengthening it if the resource proves valuable. If the food disappears, the trail weakens naturally as fewer ants reinforce it. The colony does not need to know why the path changed. It simply responds to what is present. Seen from this perspective, ants become less like machines and more like participants in an ongoing conversation with their environment. They respond to temperature, scent, vibration, and light in ways that allow them to adjust constantly without pause. This adaptability explains why ants inhabit nearly every terrestrial ecosystem, except the coldest polar regions. In tropical rainforests, they occupy multiple layers of the environment, from the soil to the canopy. In grasslands, they construct mounds that subtly alter the flow of water and nutrients. Even in urban landscapes dominated by concrete and steel, ants find ways to persist, weaving their networks through narrow spaces left behind by human construction. There is something quietly remarkable about the way ants exist alongside us, without demanding attention. Cities expand, buildings rise, roads stretch outward, yet ant colonies continue to form and reform beneath these changes. Pavement ants, for instance, thrive in the smallest crevices between stones, building nests just inches below the surface. During warm days, workers emerge to forage, creating intricate patterns across sidewalks that most people step over without noticing. Their presence becomes visible only when food is dropped, drawing a sudden convergence that seems almost spontaneous. Yet the colony beneath has been active long before that moment, maintaining tunnels and raising new generations out of sight. In forests, the experience of watching ants changes with the pace of observation. At first glance, the ground appears still, scattered with fallen leaves. Then, gradually, movement becomes apparent. A trail emerges along a fallen branch, another weaving between roots. Workers pause to exchange brief touches with antennae, then continue in opposite directions. Occasionally, a larger ant carrying a seed or fragment of insect passes by, navigating obstacles with deliberate movements. The longer one watches, the more the environment feels inhabited by an unseen population moving according to rhythms separate from human time. Desert ants offer yet another perspective on this hidden civilization. Under intense heat, they leave the safety of their nests for only short intervals, venturing into open terrain that appears empty at first glance. Their bodies are adapted to withstand extreme temperatures, and their navigation relies on subtle cues in sunlight and polarized patterns in the sky. When they return to the nest, they do so with remarkable accuracy, even after wandering paths that seem unpredictable to human observers. Their journeys illustrate how ants experience space not as static geography, but as a dynamic field of information. To describe ants merely as insects misses the scale of what they represent. A colony functions more like a distributed organism, with individuals acting as cells within a larger body. Tasks shift according to age and need. with younger workers tending to the nest and older ones venturing outward. The boundaries between roles remain flexible, allowing the colony to adapt to changes in the environment. When food is abundant, trails expand. When danger arises, alarm signals ripple through the population, prompting rapid shifts in behavior. The idea of ants as a parallel civilization becomes clearer when we consider how long they have existed. Ants appeared during the age of dinosaurs, evolving from wasp-like ancestors more than 100 million years ago. Over that immense span of time, they diversified into thousands of species, each adapted to specific conditions. Their success lies not in speed or aggression, but in their ability to cooperate through simple rules repeated across generations. Colonies rise and fall, yet the broader presence of ants persists, reshaping landscapes quietly over geological time. What makes ants particularly compelling is the contrast between their invisibility and their impact. They aerate soil as they dig, allowing water to penetrate deeper into the ground. They disperse seeds, influencing the growth of forests. They regulate populations of other insects, maintaining balance within ecosystems. These contributions occur without fanfare, woven into processes that unfold gradually. A person walking through a meadow may never notice the countless interactions happening beneath the surface, yet those interactions shape the health of the environment in subtle ways. Observing ants invites a shift in perspective. Instead of viewing them as tiny, interchangeable creatures, one begins to see patterns emerging from collective behavior. A trail forming across a path becomes evidence of decision-making, distributed across hundreds of individuals. A mound rising from the soil reflects months of labor carried out grain by grain. Even moments that seem random, a worker pausing, turning, choosing a different direction, contribute to the evolving structure of the colony's activity. The longer the observation continues, the more the boundaries between individual and collective blur. Ants move as part of something larger, yet each action remains grounded in immediate sensory information. Their world is built from scent gradients, tactile signals, and environmental cues that shape behavior moment by moment. This way of living challenges assumptions about what intelligence looks like. Rather than relying on memory or planning in the human sense, ants create systems that respond dynamically to change. Seen this way, the ground beneath us transforms into a landscape layered with hidden purpose. A patch of soil becomes the roof of a complex network. A fallen leaf becomes both shelter and resource. Even the smallest cracks in pavement host colonies that continue their work regardless of human schedules. Ants persist quietly, moving through cycles of growth and adaptation that extend far beyond individual lifespans. Their presence suggests that complexity does not require visibility, and that entire worlds can exist just below the threshold of everyday attention. Long before pavement ants traced invisible roads across city streets, and before desert wanderers learned to measure distance beneath a burning sky, the lineage that would become modern ants moved through a world that looked entirely different from the one we know. During the Cretaceous period, more than 100 million years ago, Earth was warmer, forests spread across vast continents, and dinosaurs still dominated the landscape. Within this ancient environment lived small wasp-like insects that hunted alone, relying on speed and precision rather than cooperation. They searched for prey among primitive flowering plants that were just beginning to reshape ecosystems, and their bodies carried traits that would later define ants: elbowed antennae, powerful mandibles, and glands capable of producing chemical signals. At first, these early ancestors were not social in the way ants are today. They likely nested individually or in small groups, raising their young without the elaborate systems that modern colonies display. Fossils preserved in amber give us glimpses of these transitional forms. Some show a mix of features, slender bodies like wasps, but hints of the segmented structure typical of ants. Scientists studying these fossils have found species such as Sphecomioma, an early ant that lived roughly 99 million years ago. Its anatomy suggests a creature caught between worlds, capable of hunting independently yet already experimenting with forms of interaction that would later evolve into full cooperation. The emergence of social behavior did not happen suddenly. It unfolded gradually, shaped by environmental pressures that rewarded individuals who stayed close together. In dense Cretaceous forests, resources could appear unpredictably. A solitary hunter might succeed one day and fail the next, but a small group sharing information had a better chance of surviving. Over countless generations, natural selection favored insects that could communicate chemically and coordinate their actions. Pheromone production, initially used for simple signaling, became more refined, allowing early ants to mark paths and recognize nestmates. This shift transformed survival strategies. Instead of relying solely on individual strength, early colonies benefited from division of labor, where some individuals foraged while others guarded developing larvae. The transition from solitary existence to cooperative living may have been slow and uneven, with many experimental branches of evolution that never persisted. Amber fossils reveal strange extinct ants with scythe-like jaws and unusual head shapes, evidence that evolution explored many designs before settling on the forms most successful today. Some of these early ants may have been specialized predators, capturing prey in ways unlike any modern species. Their extinction reminds us that the ant lineage was once far more diverse than it appears now, shaped by environmental changes and competition with other insects. As flowering plants spread during the Cretaceous, they created new ecological niches. Nectar, seeds, and plant-dwelling insects became abundant food sources, encouraging ants to remain in one area long enough to develop stable nests. Cooperation allowed colonies to exploit resources more efficiently than solitary insects. A group could defend territory, transport larger prey, and adapt to changing conditions more quickly than any individual alone. Over time, natural selection strengthened behaviors that supported collective success. Queens evolved as specialized egg layers, while workers became adapted for tasks such as foraging and nest maintenance. This division of labor was not a planned innovation, but the result of incremental changes accumulated over millions of years. Each small advantage, slightly better communication, more efficient brood care, improved defense, increased the likelihood that a colony would survive long enough to reproduce. Fossil evidence suggests that by the late Cretaceous, ants had already begun to diversify into multiple lineages. Some species occupied forest floors, others climbed into vegetation, and a few may have nested in early soil structures. Their expansion coincided with the decline of certain predatory insects, allowing ants to fill ecological roles that were previously dominated by solitary hunters. The extinction event that ended the age of dinosaurs also reshaped the evolutionary landscape. As ecosystems recovered and new plant communities formed, ants were ready to expand rapidly. Their social organization gave them resilience during periods of environmental upheaval. Colonies could adjust foraging patterns, relocate nests, and maintain stable populations even as conditions changed. Over tens of millions of years following the Cretaceous, ants spread across continents, evolving into thousands of species adapted to specific climates and habitats. the success of social living became increasingly clear. A colony functioned like a network of sensors, with each ant contributing information about the environment. When food sources shifted, trails changed. When predators threatened, defensive behaviors intensified. Cooperation allowed ants to exploit environments ranging from tropical rainforests to arid deserts, and even to regions shaped by seasonal cold. The fossil record shows how certain features became standardized across many ant groups. A narrow waist between thorax and abdomen for flexibility, antennae capable of detecting subtle chemical gradients, and glands that produced a variety of pheromones used for communication. These traits gave ants a toolkit for interaction that extended beyond what solitary insects could achieve. It is tempting to imagine early ants as miniature versions of modern species, but the reality was likely more complex. Some ancestral forms may have displayed only partial cooperation, gathering temporarily before dispersing again. Others might have experimented with primitive brood care, sharing responsibility for offspring in ways that blurred the line between solitary and social life. Over time, the most successful strategies became dominant. Colonies that could sustain large populations and adapt quickly to environmental change gradually replaced those that relied solely on individual survival. The emergence of fully social ants marked a turning point in the history of insects. By forming cooperative societies, ants unlocked new evolutionary possibilities. They could build nests that persisted across generations, cultivate relationships with plants and other animals, and explore habitats that would have been inaccessible to solitary ancestors. This transformation did not erase the memory of their origins. Even today, certain behaviors hint at their wasp heritage. The use of mandibles for precise manipulation, the reliance on chemical cues for navigation, and the ability to fly during reproductive phases. When winged ants take to the air during nuptial flights, they echo the movements of ancient ancestors that once lived entirely as independent hunters. Observing these flights connects modern colonies to a lineage stretching back through deep time, reminding us that the quiet trails we see today are part of a story that began long before humans walked the earth. Understanding the origins of ants reshapes the way we view their presence in the landscapes around us. The lines crossing sidewalks and forest paths are not random phenomena, but the result of evolutionary experiments refined over millions of years. Each interaction between workers reflects adaptations that once helped early ants survive in ancient forests filled with unfamiliar predators and shifting climates. Their ability to cooperate allowed them to endure mass extinctions, continental drift, and the rise of new ecosystems. Today, ants remain one of the most widespread and abundant groups of animals on land. Their success, rooted in decisions made not by individuals but by the slow pressure of natural selection, guiding countless generations toward collective living. As ants continue to refine their cooperative way of living across deep time, their bodies quietly transformed into instruments shaped not for individual survival alone, but for participation in something larger than themselves. And to understand how they move through the world requires abandoning the human idea of perception, built around sight and sound, and instead stepping into a reality guided by texture, scent, pressure, and constant physical feedback. An ant's exoskeleton is the first clue that it belongs to a different design philosophy than most animals we recognize. Rather than carrying bones hidden beneath muscle, ants wear their structure on the outside, a hardened shell made of chitin that protects delicate tissues while acting as both armor and framework. This outer skeleton allows them to distribute force in ways that seem almost improbable. When an ant carries an object many times its own weight, It is not relying on brute strength alone, but on geometry and leverage. The curved plates of the thorax and abdomen flex subtly, absorbing strain that would tear softer bodies apart. Researchers observing leafcutter ants have measured workers transporting fragments several dozen times heavier than themselves, and while this ability is often exaggerated in popular stories, it remains true that their anatomy is optimized for efficiency rather than speed. The joints between segments move with remarkable precision, allowing ants to climb vertical surfaces, navigate narrow tunnels, and maintain stability even when the ground beneath them vibrates or shifts. If the exoskeleton forms the foundation, the mandibles act as the most versatile tools in an ant's existence. These jaws are not simply for biting. They are multi-purpose instruments capable of cutting leaves, carrying larvae, digging soil, defending territory, and even performing delicate tasks like grooming nestmates. Under magnification, mandibles reveal intricate ridges and shapes adapted to each species' lifestyle. Trapjaw ants possess elongated mandibles that snap shut at extraordinary speed, creating a force strong enough to stun prey or propel the ant backward like a spring-released. Soldier ants in certain species develop oversized mandibles shaped like shields, using them to block nest entrances against invaders. Meanwhile, fungus-growing ants wield their jaws like agricultural tools, slicing vegetation into precise fragments that become substrate for their cultivated crops. Watching these movements closely reveals a rhythm almost mechanical in its consistency, as if each ant carries an inherited memory of how to manipulate the world around it. Yet the most important sensory organs are not the eyes or jaws, but the antennae, slender structures that move constantly as ants walk, tapping the ground, brushing against objects, and touching other ants in a continuous exchange of information. Antennae function as chemical detectors capable of sensing minute differences in pheromone concentration, allowing ants to follow trails invisible to us. Each tap against the ground gathers data about who has passed recently, what resources were found, and whether danger lies ahead. When two ants meet, they often pause briefly, antennae crossing in what appears to be a greeting but is actually a rapid transfer of chemical cues confirming identity and role. Scientists have compared this process to reading a barcode, an instant recognition system that keeps colonies organized without centralized control. Although ants do possess eyes, in many species vision plays only a minor role. Their world is primarily constructed from gradients of scent and vibration, rather than visual detail. A worker navigating a forest floor may rely more on the feel of the ground beneath its feet and the faint chemical signature left by nestmates than on any image of the landscape. Vibrations traveling through soil and plant stems provide additional layers of awareness, alerting ants to approaching predators or the movement of prey. Some desert ants, adapted to harsh environments where scent trails evaporate quickly, combine limited visual landmarks with internal step counting systems to navigate back to their nests, demonstrating how anatomy and environment shape perception differently across species. Hidden within the ant's body are glands responsible for producing the chemical language that defines colony life. The Dufour's gland, poison gland, and mandibular glands each secrete specific compounds used for communication, defense, or recruitment. When a forager discovers food, it may release a trail pheromone from its abdomen, laying down an invisible path that guides others to the source. Alarm pheromones released during encounters with predators spread rapidly through a colony, transforming calm workers into coordinated defenders. These chemical signals do not linger indefinitely. They fade over time, allowing trails to shift and colonies to adapt to changing conditions without confusion. Observing an ant trail dissolve after food is exhausted offers a glimpse into how dynamic this communication system truly is, constantly rewritten by the needs of the moment. Even respiration reveals how different an ant's body is from ours. Instead of lungs, ants breathe through spiracles, tiny openings along the sides of their bodies that connect to a network of tubes delivering oxygen directly to tissues. This system eliminates the need for blood to carry oxygen, but also limits body size, one reason ants remain small despite their ecological success. The efficiency of this design becomes apparent in underground environments, where oxygen levels fluctuate. Ants can regulate airflow by opening and closing spiracles, maintaining balance within crowded nests. Their nervous systems, though simple compared to vertebrates, are finely tuned to coordinate precise movements and rapid responses. Each ant operates with a degree of autonomy, yet the structure of its brain reflects tasks shaped by the colony's needs. Foragers develop neural pathways suited to navigation and memory, while nurses tending brood show heightened sensitivity to chemical cues from larvae. These differences emerge not through conscious learning alone, but through developmental processes influenced by nutrition, age, and environmental conditions. The ant's perception of the world is therefore not static, but evolves as it transitions between roles throughout its life. A young worker may begin by caring for eggs deep within the nest, gradually moving outward to forage as it ages and gains experience, its sensory priorities shifting along the way. Even the surface of an ant's body contributes to communication. The cuticle carries hydrocarbons unique to each colony, functioning like a collective scent signature. When an outsider approaches, subtle differences in this chemical profile trigger defensive responses, maintaining the integrity of the social group. This system operates continuously, silently enforcing boundaries without the need for visual markers or physical barriers. The result is a society held together by invisible threads, where anatomy and chemistry merge into a seamless form of organization. Understanding ants from this perspective reveals how profoundly different their reality is from our own. Where humans rely heavily on sight and individual decision-making, ants navigate through layers of information embedded in their environment, responding to signals too faint for us to perceive. Every movement of an antenna, every adjustment of a mandible, every drop of pheromone released contributes to a collective awareness that extends beyond any single individual. Their bodies are not merely tools for survival, but instruments tuned to a shared rhythm, shaped by millions of years of evolution to function within a living network. As the anatomy of ants reveals how differently they experience the world, a deeper realization begins to emerge when observing an entire colony at work. The individual ant is only one part of a much larger system, and the true organism may be the colony itself. Walking along a forest trail or the edge of a city pavement, it is easy to assume that each ant acts independently, making small decisions that shape its own path. Yet when viewed over time, patterns appear that no single ant seems capable of planning. Food trails grow and fade, nests expand and reorganize, defenses activate precisely where threats appear. This coherence does not arise from a leader issuing commands, but from thousands of tiny actions reinforcing one another, creating a structure that behaves more like a living body than a collection of insects. One of the most subtle expressions of this collective life lies in how workers change roles as they age. A newly emerged worker typically begins its life deep inside the nest where conditions are stable and risks are minimal. Here it tends to eggs and larvae, cleaning chambers and exchanging food with nestmates through trophallaxis, a process of mouth-to-mouth feeding that spreads nutrients and chemical information throughout the colony. As weeks pass, the same ant gradually shifts outward, first assisting in nest maintenance and eventually becoming a forager exposed to the outside world. This progression is not dictated by conscious planning, but by internal changes influenced by hormones and environmental cues. The colony, in effect, reallocates its resources over time, using younger individuals for tasks requiring delicacy and older ones for riskier work. Such flexibility allows the colony to respond dynamically to shifting conditions without centralized oversight. The absence of a visible leader often surprises observers accustomed to hierarchical systems. Queens, despite their importance as egg layers, do not command workers or direct daily activities. Instead, decisions emerge from feedback loops that connect individual behavior to environmental signals. When a forager finds a rich food source, it deposits a pheromone trail on the return journey. Other ants encountering this trail are more likely to follow it, strengthening the signal if they too find food. Over time, the most efficient paths become reinforced, while less productive routes fade away as their chemical markers evaporate. This process resembles a form of collective memory written directly onto the landscape, updated continuously through use rather than instruction. Scientists studying ant colonies have described this phenomenon as decentralized decision-making, a system where complex solutions arise from simple rules followed by many participants simultaneously. Observing a colony relocate to a new nest offers a clear illustration of this principle. When the existing nest becomes unsuitable, scout ants explore potential alternatives, assessing factors such as humidity, darkness, and space. Each scout returns to the colony carrying chemical cues that influence the behavior of others. No single ant evaluates all options. Instead, a consensus forms gradually as more individuals reinforce the most suitable location. Once a threshold is reached, workers begin transporting brood and nestmates to the new site, transforming scattered exploration into coordinated movement. The process unfolds with remarkable efficiency, despite the absence of a central authority, suggesting that intelligence can emerge from interaction rather than from any one individual's awareness. This distributed form of organization challenges the way humans often think about control and leadership. In an ant colony, stability arises not from rigid structure but from adaptability. If a trail is disrupted, foragers explore alternatives until a new path stabilizes. If predators attack, alarm pheromones trigger rapid defensive responses localized to the area of danger. The colony behaves as though it senses and responds to the environment as a single entity, even though no ant possesses a complete picture of what is happening. Researchers have compared this dynamic to neural networks, where simple units interacting through feedback loops create patterns far more sophisticated than any one component could achieve alone. The idea of the colony as a superorganism captures this perspective. Just as cells within a body perform specialized roles while contributing to the health of the whole, ants operate as living units integrated into a collective metabolism. Nutrients flow through the colony via shared feeding. Information travels through pheromones and physical contact, and structural changes emerge from coordinated building behavior. Termites and certain bees exhibit similar systems, but ants provide some of the most striking examples because of their diversity and adaptability across environments. In laboratory experiments, scientists have demonstrated how ant colonies can solve complex problems such as optimizing foraging routes or distributing labor efficiently, all without centralized planning. These findings have inspired fields ranging from computer science to robotics, where algorithms based on ant behavior help optimize traffic flow and network design. Yet beyond the scientific fascination lies a quieter realization. Watching a colony work over hours reveals a rhythm that feels almost organic, like the pulse of a living organism breathing through countless bodies. Individual ants may falter or disappear, but the colony persists, adjusting seamlessly to loss or change. This resilience emerges from redundancy. Many ants share similar roles, allowing tasks to continue even if some individuals fail. The colony's identity therefore transcends any single member, existing as a pattern sustained through interaction rather than through permanence. The architecture of nests further reinforces this concept. Underground chambers, connected by narrow tunnels, regulate airflow, temperature, and humidity, functioning much like organs within a body. Workers adjust the structure continuously, removing soil grains, repairing damage, and responding to subtle environmental shifts. In leafcutter ant colonies, waste disposal areas are carefully separated from fungal gardens to prevent contamination, reflecting a level of spatial organization that emerges without conscious design. These structures evolve gradually, shaped by local decisions that accumulate into complex forms over time. Observers might search for a blueprint guiding such construction, but none exists beyond the simple rules encoded in the behavior of individual ants. The colony's cohesion also depends on chemical harmony. Each ant carries a unique blend of hydrocarbons that signal membership, creating a shared scent profile that binds individuals into a collective identity. When foreign ants approach, differences in this chemical signature trigger defensive reactions, protecting the colony's integrity. This process mirrors the immune system of larger organisms, where recognition of self and non-self determines response. The analogy to a living body becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Ants function as mobile cells, pheromones act as hormones, and the nest itself serves as a physical framework supporting the whole. Understanding ants as a superorganism reshapes the narrative introduced earlier in the story. The pavement trails and forest processions are not simply lines of insects moving independently, but expressions of a larger entity exploring its surroundings. The evolutionary journey from solitary wasps to cooperative societies reached its culmination in this form of collective life, where survival depends not on individual success, but on the harmony of many small actions. The colony senses through thousands of antennae, moves through countless legs, and adapts through feedback loops that integrate experience across time. What appears from a distance as chaos resolves into a form of order that is both flexible and enduring, revealing a different way for life to exist and thrive within the constraints of the natural world. When the idea of the colony as a living organism settles into place, the ground beneath our feet begins to feel less solid than it once did, because below the surface lies a network of chambers and tunnels shaped by countless individuals who have never seen the finished structure they help create. Ant nests are often described as cities, yet that word barely captures the quiet complexity hidden within the soil. A single entrance may appear modest, just a narrow opening surrounded by scattered grains of sand, but beneath it extends a layered architecture that can reach surprising depths depending on species and environment. Some desert harvester ants construct nests several meters deep to escape extreme heat, while tropical leaf-cutter colonies carve out vast underground volumes large enough to rival the mass of small buildings. What makes these structures remarkable is not just their size, but the absence of any blueprint guiding their construction. Each ant responds to local cues, moisture levels, temperature gradients, the presence of brood or food, and from these tiny decisions emerges a coherent design. Watching ants build reveals a process more akin to growth than to deliberate planning. Workers carry soil particles upward, depositing them outside in small piles that gradually reshape the landscape. Inside the nest, chambers widen slowly as ants remove grains one by one, guided by tactile feedback rather than visual awareness. Researchers have observed that when ants encounter curved surfaces or areas where airflow changes, they instinctively modify excavation patterns, creating arches and vaults that distribute pressure evenly through the soil. These forms arise naturally from the interaction between behavior and environment, demonstrating how engineering solutions can evolve without conscious intention. In certain species, the structure of the nest also regulates airflow in ways that resemble natural ventilation systems. Openings positioned at different heights create pressure differences that draw fresh air inward while allowing carbon dioxide and excess heat to escape. In hot climates, ants adjust the size of the entrance holes or block them partially with debris to control internal conditions, responding to temperature shifts long before humans might notice them. Experiments using smoke or carbon dioxide tracers have revealed how air circulates through tunnels, rising through warm chambers and descending through cooler ones, maintaining a stable microclimate for larvae and fungal gardens. This passive regulation requires no central coordination. It emerges from the way ants shape their environment in response to immediate needs. Within these underground networks, space is divided according to function. Nursery chambers hold eggs and developing larvae, positioned where humidity remains high and temperatures fluctuate minimally. Workers tend to the brood constantly, rotating individuals between locations to ensure even development. Nearby chambers may store food collected from the surface, from seeds to insect remains, each resource sorted carefully to prevent spoilage. In fungus-growing ants, entire gardens occupy dedicated rooms, cultivated with precision as workers prune and fertilize the growing substrate. Observing these chambers through transparent laboratory nests reveals an atmosphere of quiet activity, with ants moving steadily between tasks without interruption. Waste management forms another crucial element of nest architecture, reflecting the colony's need to maintain hygiene despite crowded conditions. Many species designate specific areas as refuse dumps, carrying debris and deceased nestmates away from living quarters to reduce the spread of disease. Some ants even create external midden piles, small mounds of discarded material that accumulate over time near nest entrances. Studies have shown that workers handling waste often belong to specialized groups less involved in brood care, minimizing contamination risk. This separation of roles mirrors the organization of larger organisms, where different tissues perform distinct functions to maintain overall health. Soil sorting adds another layer of complexity to nest construction. When excavating, ants do not remove particles randomly. They select grains based on size and texture, using coarser materials to reinforce structural areas while finer particles fill gaps. The resulting patterns can influence water drainage and stability, preventing collapse during heavy rain. Engineers studying these behaviors have drawn inspiration from ant excavation techniques, noting how simple rules followed consistently can produce robust structures without the need for detailed planning. Even the shape of entrance mounds may serve multiple purposes, from preventing flooding to capturing warmth from sunlight during cooler seasons. These architectural achievements become more striking when considering the sensory limitations described earlier. Ants do not see the full extent of their nests. Each individual experiences only a small portion of the structure, guided by touch, scent, and subtle environmental feedback. yet collectively they maintain systems capable of adapting to changing conditions over time. If a tunnel collapses, workers redirect traffic and begin repairs almost immediately. If humidity drops, brood is relocated to deeper chambers. The nest behaves as though it senses and responds as a unified entity, even though awareness remains distributed among thousands of individuals. Observers who pour plaster into abandoned nests to create casts of their interiors often reveal shapes resembling branching trees or spiraling staircases, structures that feel almost intentional despite arising from decentralized behavior. The comparison to human cities may seem tempting, but ant nests differ fundamentally in their relationship to growth. Human architecture often aims for permanence, while ant structures remain fluid, constantly reshaped by the needs of the colony. Chambers expand or shrink depending on population size, and entire nests may be abandoned when environmental conditions shift. In some cases, colonies maintain multiple satellite nests connected by trails, distributing resources across a wider area to reduce risk. This flexibility allows ants to adapt to landscapes that change with seasons, rainfall, and competition from other species. Beneath the surface, the rhythm of construction never truly stops. Even during periods of apparent stillness, workers adjust walls, reinforce ceilings, and reorganize stored materials. The result is an architecture defined not by static design, but by continuous interaction between behavior and environment. Watching this process unfold invites a different perspective on engineering itself, one where complexity arises from countless small actions rather than from centralized plans. The hidden world beneath our feet becomes less mysterious when, viewed through this lens, revealing not chaos but a quiet order shaped by cooperation, patience, and the slow accumulation of effort over time. Beneath the architecture of tunnels and chambers, another layer of structure exists that cannot be seen at all, yet it shapes nearly every movement within a colony. Ants live inside a language composed not of sound but of chemistry, a shifting network of signals that spreads across soil, leaves, and bodies, constantly rewritten as conditions change. When a worker leaves the nest and begins to explore, it does not move randomly. Each step is influenced by faint traces left behind by others, microscopic droplets of pheromones that linger on the ground. These trails function less like fixed roads and more like evolving maps, changing in intensity as ants reinforce or abandon them. A single forager discovering a promising food source may lay down a tentative line of scent on the way back, barely noticeable at first. Other ants encountering that line decide whether to follow based on its strength, and if they too find food, they add their own pheromones, amplifying the signal. Over time, a narrow path emerges, curving around obstacles, adjusting to terrain, and guiding hundreds of ants toward a shared destination without any one individual knowing the full layout. Watching this process unfold from above feels almost like observing a living river form spontaneously, its currents shaped by countless tiny contributions. These trails do not remain static. Sunlight, wind, and the passage of time slowly erode the chemical markers, allowing the colony to adapt when resources disappear. If food is removed, returning ants fail to reinforce the trail, and it fades into invisibility within hours. This impermanence prevents the colony from becoming trapped in outdated patterns. Researchers studying Argentine ants have demonstrated how multiple trails compete with one another, with the most efficient routes gradually dominating as more ants travel along them. The process resembles natural selection operating in real time, where successful paths grow stronger while less useful ones vanish. Alarm signals introduce a different kind of communication, one driven by urgency rather than exploration. When an ant encounters danger, a predator, a disturbance to the nest, or an unfamiliar scent, it releases volatile pheromones that spread rapidly through the air. Nearby workers respond almost instantly, shifting from routine tasks to defensive behavior. Some species rush toward the source of the signal, mandibles open, while others begin evacuating brood to safer chambers. The speed of this reaction can feel startling, especially because it occurs without visible coordination. A few droplets of chemical information transform the mood of an entire area, turning calm foragers into a coordinated defensive force. Yet these alarm pheromones fade quickly, ensuring that once the threat passes, normal activity resumes without lingering confusion. Recognition of nestmates adds another layer to this invisible dialogue. Each colony carries a unique blend of hydrocarbons coating the surface of its members, forming a chemical identity that functions like a shared signature. When ants meet, their antennae exchange brief touches, sampling the signature to confirm belonging. An unfamiliar scent triggers hesitation or aggression, depending on the species and context. This system allows colonies to maintain cohesion even in environments where multiple nests exist close together. Scientists have found that ants raised in isolation can adopt new colony scents through contact, showing how identity is shaped by interaction rather than fixed from birth. The process resembles a constantly updated password, refreshed through daily exchanges of food and grooming. The emergence and disappearance of trails reveal how communication remains fluid rather than rigid. Imagine a fallen fruit attracting foragers from several directions. At first, ants approach along multiple weak paths, each marked by faint pheromone traces. As more workers converge, the shortest and most efficient route becomes increasingly reinforced, drawing traffic away from less direct lines. Eventually, a single dominant trail may form, guiding a steady stream of ants back and forth between nest and food source. If the fruit is removed or consumed, the reinforcement stops and the trail dissolves. From a distance, it appears as though the ants have collectively decided to abandon the path, but in reality the change arises from the gradual fading of chemical cues. Traffic flow along these routes demonstrates a remarkable level of collective organization. Studies using high-speed cameras have shown that ants rarely collide even when moving in dense streams. Individuals adjust their speed and direction subtly in response to antennae contact and pheromone gradients, creating patterns reminiscent of flowing water. When obstacles appear, ants reroute automatically, forming temporary detours that merge back into the main trail once the path clears. This efficiency has inspired research into swarm robotics and traffic engineering, where algorithms based on behavior help manage congestion and optimize movement in complex systems. Observing these flows reveals a sense of calm order, where thousands of decisions align without any central authority dictating the outcome. Communication extends beyond the ground as well. Some ants use pheromones to mark vertical surfaces or plant stems, guiding nestmates upward toward food sources hidden among leaves. Others rely on tactile signals, tapping antennae rhythmically to convey urgency or direction. In certain species, vibrations transmitted through the substrate act as additional messages, allowing ants to signal danger or recruit help without releasing volatile chemicals. These layered channels of communication create redundancy, ensuring that information spreads even when one method becomes unreliable. In hot deserts where scent trails evaporate quickly, visual landmarks and internal navigation systems complement chemical cues, illustrating how communication adapts to environmental constraints. The invisible language shaping colony life does not belong to any single ant. It exists in the space between individuals, written onto the landscape through movement and interaction. Trails, alarm signals, recognition scents, and tactile exchanges form a network that guides behavior moment by moment. Watching ants communicate challenges the human assumption that language requires sound or symbols. Here, meaning emerges from gradients of chemistry, from patterns that appear and disappear as the colony responds to shifting conditions. The ground becomes a living document, constantly edited by the passage of tiny feet, carrying a record of exploration, danger, and cooperation, written in molecules too faint for us to see, yet powerful enough to organize entire societies. Within the chemical language that shapes every movement of a colony, one figure is often misunderstood more than any other: the queen. Human imagination tends to picture her as a ruler seated at the center of an organized society, directing workers like subjects in a miniature monarchy. Yet when scientists observe real colonies, the image dissolves into something quieter and more biological. The queen does not command or strategize. She functions primarily as a reproductive engine, a living source of continuity whose presence stabilizes the colony through chemistry rather than authority. Her influence spreads through pheromones that signal fertility and cohesion, but these signals do not dictate behavior in the way human leadership does. Workers continue to forage, build, and communicate based on local interactions, guided by environmental cues rather than by orders from a central figure. Understanding this distinction reveals how deeply different ant societies are from human hierarchies, even though the language we use often suggests otherwise. The life of a queen begins not in the depths of a nest, but in the open air during a brief and remarkable event known as the nuptial flight. On warm days when humidity and temperature align, winged males and females emerge from mature colonies and take flight together, rising into currents of wind that carry them across the landscape. From a distance, these flights may look like drifting clouds of insects, but each participant carries the future of a colony within its body. Males exist only for this moment, their sole purpose to mate before dying shortly afterward. Fertilized females descend to the ground, shedding their wings and searching for a suitable place to begin a new nest. This transition from airborne independence to subterranean isolation marks one of the most vulnerable periods in an ant's life. A founding queen may spend weeks alone in a small chamber, laying her first eggs and surviving on stored energy reserves while tending to developing larvae. Her success depends not on strength, but on patience, as she nurtures the first generation of workers that will eventually take over the tasks of foraging and construction. Once workers emerge, the role of the queen becomes increasingly specialized. She rarely leaves the nest again, devoting her energy almost entirely to egg production. In some species, queens live for decades, far longer than the workers who sustain the colony around them. Their longevity reflects a biological trade-off. While workers expend energy on risky tasks outside the nest, queens remain protected within stable chambers, allowing them to continue producing offspring across many seasons. Yet even this central position does not grant control over daily activities. Workers respond to environmental signals, pheromone trails, and interactions with one another rather than waiting for instructions. The colony's structure emerges from feedback loops, not from hierarchy. Variations among species reveal how flexible these systems can be. Some colonies operate with a single queen, a structure known as monogeny, where reproductive authority is concentrated in one individual. Others embrace polygyny, hosting multiple queens within the same nest. In such systems, cooperation between queens increases the rate of colony expansion, allowing populations to grow rapidly and occupy larger territories. Argentine ants provide a striking example, forming super colonies that stretch across continents, where thousands of nests cooperate rather than compete. The presence of multiple queens challenges the notion of centralized power even further, demonstrating that the success of a colony does not rely on one dominant figure, but on the collective balance between reproduction and labor. Reproduction cycles shape the rhythm of colony life in ways that often remain hidden from casual observation. Seasonal changes influence when queens lay eggs, when winged individuals develop, and when new colonies emerge through budding or flight. In temperate regions, many species slow their activity during colder months, conserving energy until conditions improve. Deep within nests, queens continue laying eggs in patterns linked to temperature and resource availability, ensuring that new workers emerge when food becomes plentiful. This synchronization between reproduction and environment reflects the colony's ability to respond collectively to external cues, integrating biological processes with the rhythms of the natural world. Observing the interactions between queens and workers reveals subtle exchanges that maintain harmony within the colony. Workers groom the queen, feed her, and distribute her pheromones throughout the nest, reinforcing a shared chemical identity. If a queen dies, or her pheromone output declines, workers may begin raising new reproductive individuals, shifting the colony's structure in response to internal signals. In some species, workers themselves can lay unfertilized eggs that develop into males, further blurring the boundaries between roles. These dynamics illustrate how hierarchy in ant societies differs fundamentally from human expectations. Authority does not flow downward from a single leader. Instead, it emerges from a network of interactions that balance reproduction, labor, and environmental response. The founding of new colonies offers another glimpse into the complexity of ant reproduction. Some species rely exclusively on nuptial flights, while others expand through budding, where a group of workers escorts one or more queens to establish a new nest nearby. This method allows colonies to spread gradually across landscapes, forming interconnected networks rather than isolated units. Over time, these expansions reshape ecosystems, influencing plant growth, soil composition, and interactions with other animals. The reproductive strategies of ants therefore extend beyond individual survival, shaping the distribution of entire populations across continents. Understanding the queen's true role requires letting go of familiar metaphors. She's not a ruler issuing commands, but a biological center around which the colony organizes itself. Workers do not obey her in the human sense. They respond to chemical signals that reflect the health and fertility of the colony. When conditions change, the colony adapts through decentralized processes rather than through decrees from above. This distinction becomes clearer when watching how ants handle disruptions. If part of a nest collapses or a food source disappears, workers adjust their behavior immediately, often without any direct interaction with the queen. The colony's resilience arises from flexibility, not from strict hierarchy. By reframing queens as participants in a larger system rather than as monarchs, the story of ant societies becomes more nuanced and more accurate. Their organization reflects a balance between specialization and cooperation, where reproduction and labor intertwine to sustain a living network that persists across generations. The invisible language described earlier carries signals of fertility and identity, guiding workers in ways that maintain cohesion without central authority. In this light, the queen becomes less a symbol of power and more a reminder of continuity, a quiet presence at the heart of a colony that thrives through collective effort rather than command. Inside the nest, far from shifting weather and the open landscape described earlier, daily life unfolds through thousands of small interactions that rarely attract attention, yet sustain the colony with remarkable precision. The chambers carved beneath soil or hidden within wood hold a steady rhythm, shaped not by sudden events but by repetition and quiet cooperation. Workers move through narrow tunnels carrying droplets of liquid food, fragments of prey, or tiny white larvae held carefully between their mandibles. Each movement connects to another, forming networks of exchange that blur the boundaries between individuals. At the center of this constant motion lies the process of feeding, not as a simple act of consumption, but as a shared system known as trophallaxis. When a forager returns from outside with a crop filled with nectar or dissolved nutrients, it pauses among nestmates and gently opens its mandibles, allowing another ant to receive a portion of the liquid directly. This mouth-to-mouth exchange spreads food quickly through the colony, while also distributing chemical signals that carry information about the environment. Scientists studying these interactions have found that trophallaxis functions almost like a circulatory system, moving not only nourishment but also hormones and pheromones that influence behavior and development. A larva fed by one worker indirectly receives resources gathered by many others, linking distant parts of the colony through invisible chains of sharing. Watching this process through transparent observation nests reveals a calm persistence rather than urgency. Ants approach one another briefly, exchange food and continue onward without hesitation, as though participating in a continuous conversation written in liquid form. Larvae themselves play an active role in shaping colony dynamics. Though they appear motionless at first glance, they release chemical signals indicating hunger, growth stage, and health. Workers respond by adjusting feeding frequency, rotating larvae between chambers with different temperatures, and grooming them to remove debris or fungal spores. The care given to brood reflects a balance between precision and flexibility. If resources become scarce, feeding patterns shift subtly, slowing development without halting it entirely. This ability to regulate growth across hundreds or thousands of larvae demonstrates how the colony integrates environmental conditions into its daily routine. Cleaning and grooming behaviors form another essential layer of life inside the nest. Ants regularly pass their antennae and mandibles across their own bodies, removing particles that might carry pathogens. They groom nestmates with similar attention, particularly after encounters with the outside world. In some species, specialized workers focus more heavily on sanitation tasks, transporting waste to designated chambers or external refuse piles described earlier. These actions reduce the spread of disease in densely populated environments where close contact is unavoidable. Observers often notice that grooming occurs during brief pauses in movement, moments when ants cluster together and exchange touches that appear gentle compared to their otherwise efficient motions. The importance of hygiene becomes especially clear during periods when fungal infections threaten colonies. Certain ants produce antimicrobial secretions that they apply during grooming, reinforcing the idea that even simple behaviors contribute to collective health. Food sharing extends beyond direct feeding events to form a broader network connecting different parts of the nest. A worker receiving nutrients from one ant may later pass them to another, creating chains of exchange that distribute resources evenly. These networks adjust constantly depending on who returns from foraging, which larvae require attention, and how environmental conditions change. Researchers tracking dyed food through colonies have observed how quickly nutrients spread, reaching individuals that never left the nest within a short period. This efficiency ensures that no single area becomes isolated, reinforcing the concept of the colony as a unified organism rather than a collection of separate lives. Aging plays a quiet yet significant role in shaping daily activity. Young workers typically remain deep within the nest, tending brood and maintaining internal structures where risks are minimal. As they grow older, hormonal changes encourage them to move toward the entrance, eventually taking on the role of foragers exposed to predators and environmental hazards. This progression balances safety and necessity, allowing the colony to protect its youngest members while still maintaining a steady supply of resources. Watching a mature colony over time reveals how seamlessly individuals transition between tasks, responding to subtle shifts in chemical signals rather than to explicit instructions. If foragers are lost, or resources increase suddenly, younger workers may accelerate their transition outward, filling gaps in labour without any visible disruption to the overall rhythm. Activity inside the nest follows patterns influenced by temperature, light cycles, and resource availability. While ants do not experience day and night in the same way humans do, many species exhibit fluctuations in movement intensity that correspond to external conditions. During cooler hours, workers may cluster around brood chambers, maintaining warmth through close contact. As temperatures rise, activity spreads outward, with foragers departing and returning in steady waves. Some ants take brief rest periods lasting only minutes, entering states of reduced movement that resemble sleep, though they remain ready to respond to signals from nestmates. These cycles create a sense of continuity rather than distinct beginnings or endings, as though the colony breathes through phases of activity and stillness. Observing life inside the colony invites a different understanding of time. Instead of dramatic events, the nest reveals slow transformations shaped by countless small decisions. Larvae grow gradually, chambers shift in size, and trails adjust outside while internal routines maintain stability. Even moments that appear insignificant, a worker pausing to groom another, a brief exchange of food between passing ants, contribute to the resilience of the entire system. The deeper one looks, the more the boundaries between individual actions dissolve into a shared rhythm sustained through interaction. Beyond the steady routines unfolding within the nest, many ant species extend their influence into the wider landscape through behaviours that reshape ecosystems in ways that feel surprisingly familiar to human practices. In tropical forests, leafcutter ants move in long, patient processions beneath the canopy, each worker carrying a fragment of vegetation that appears oversized against its body. From a distance, the lines resemble moving streams of green, flowing along established trails that curve around roots and fallen branches. These leaves are not consumed directly. Instead, they become the foundation of a sophisticated agricultural system that has existed for millions of years. Deep underground, workers chew the plant material into a soft pulp and arrange it carefully into fungal gardens, cultivating a specific species of fungus that serves as the colony's primary food source. The ants prune the growing fungus constantly, removing unwanted molds and adjusting humidity by relocating pieces between chambers. Observers watching these gardens through transparent research nests often describe them as living landscapes, textured with delicate filaments that respond to the presence of ants, like fields tended by invisible farmers. The relationship between leafcutters and their cultivated fungus is so precise that neither organism can survive without the other. Young queens beginning new colonies carry a small pellet of fungus within their mandibles during nuptial flights, ensuring that the agricultural cycle continues even when a colony splits into new territories. This partnership demonstrates how evolution can shape cooperation across species boundaries, turning ants into gardeners whose influence extends far beyond the nest itself. In other parts of the world, ants engage in a different form of agriculture, one centered not on fungi, but on insects that produce sweet secretions. Aphids, small sap-feeding creatures that cluster along plant stems, excrete droplets of honeydew rich in sugars. Certain ants tend to these aphids much like herdsmen, protecting them from predators and moving them to fresh feeding sites when necessary. Workers gently tap aphids with their antennae to stimulate the release of honeydew, collecting the droplets and carrying them back to the colony. This interaction forms a delicate balance. The aphids gain protection and improved access to resources, while the ants secure a reliable food source. Observing this behavior reveals a level of coordination that feels almost intentional, yet it arises from simple rules, reinforced through chemical communication and instinctive responses. Some ants even construct shelters around aphid colonies using soil or plant fibers, shielding them from rain and temperature fluctuations. These miniature structures blur the line between animal behavior and environmental engineering, suggesting that the boundaries of agriculture extend further into the insect world than we might expect. High in the trees of tropical Asia and Africa, weaver ants demonstrate another remarkable adaptation, transforming leaves into living nests through cooperation that combines strength and precision. Workers gather along the edges of flexible leaves, pulling them together with their mandibles, while others bring larvae whose silk becomes the binding thread. The ants hold the larvae like living glue dispensers, gently pressing them along seams where silk hardens into a durable bond. Over time, clusters of leaves fuse into green chambers suspended above the forest floor, swaying slightly with the movement of wind. Inside these nests, brood develops in protected spaces cooled by airflow through the canopy. The construction process requires coordination among dozens or hundreds of ants, each responding to the tension in the leaves and the chemical signals exchanged during building. Watching weaver ants assemble a nest reveals a choreography shaped not by leadership but by shared responsiveness, where each individual contributes to a structure no single ant could create alone. Army ants offer a contrasting vision of collective life, defined less by stationary architecture and more by movement itself. Instead of building permanent nests, many army ant species form temporary living structures composed entirely of their own bodies. During migrations, workers link together, creating bridges across gaps and forming protective bivouacs, where the queen and brood rest at night. These living nests expand and contract as ants arrive or depart, adjusting shape to accommodate the needs of the colony. Columns of army ants may stretch across the forest floor in organized waves, sweeping through leaf litter in search of prey. Their presence transforms the surrounding environment, flushing insects and small animals from hiding places, which in turn attracts birds that follow the migrating swarm. This dynamic relationship between predator and ecosystem illustrates how specialized behaviors ripple outward, influencing entire communities of organisms. The bridges formed by army ants provide one of the most striking examples of collective engineering. When workers encounter a gap too wide to cross individually, some ants anchor themselves to one side while others climb over their bodies, gradually forming a living pathway that allows traffic to continue uninterrupted. As more ants arrive, the structure strengthens, distributing weight across multiple individuals. Once the flow of movement decreases, The bridge dissolves naturally as ants detach and continue their journey. This fluid architecture exists only as long as it is needed, demonstrating how cooperation can create solutions that adapt instantly to changing conditions. Across these diverse lifestyles, fungus farming, aphid herding, leaf weaving, and migratory bridge building, the underlying theme remains the same. Ants extend the boundaries of the colony beyond the nest through specialized roles that reshape their surroundings. Each behavior reflects an evolutionary path shaped by environment and opportunity, revealing how flexible ant societies can become when cooperation unlocks new strategies for survival. Observing these practices invites a deeper appreciation for the variety of ways ants interact with the world, turning landscapes into networks of cultivation, protection, and movement that unfold quietly alongside human lives. Beyond the specialized lifestyles that shape forests and fields, another layer of complexity becomes visible when watching how ants navigate landscapes that appear featureless to human eyes. In deserts where heat shimmers across the sand and scent trails evaporate within minutes, certain species rely on a remarkable internal system to find their way home. Desert ants leave the safety of their nests alone, venturing into open terrain where landmarks are scarce. Their journeys may twist and wander as they search for dead insects carried by wind, yet when they turn back toward the nest, they often travel in a nearly straight line. This ability puzzled researchers for decades until experiments revealed that these ants use polarized sunlight as a compass. The sky contains patterns of light invisible to human vision, formed by the scattering of sunlight through the atmosphere. Specialized cells in the ants' eyes detect these patterns, allowing them to determine direction even when the sun itself is hidden behind clouds or dunes. Watching a desert ant pause briefly and rotate its body before continuing suggests a quiet recalibration, as though it is checking an internal map written in light rather than in images. Alongside this solar compass, desert ants employ a system known as path integration, a method of tracking distance by counting steps. In controlled studies, scientists altered the length of ants' legs by attaching tiny extensions or trimming them slightly. The results were striking. Ants with artificially lengthened legs overshot their nests, while those with shortened legs stopped too soon. These experiments revealed that ants measure distance not through visual estimation, but through a form of internal arithmetic based on movement. Each step contributes to a mental record of how far the ant has travelled, allowing it to calculate the most direct route back, even after wandering in search of food. This capacity does not require conscious thought in the human sense. It arises from neural circuits shaped by evolution to integrate motion, direction, and environmental feedback. The idea that such small creatures can perform navigational calculations challenges assumptions about intelligence, suggesting that complex behavior can emerge from simple biological rules. Collective intelligence becomes even more evident when ants optimize paths to food sources. Observers who place multiple bridges between a nest and a food supply often notice that ants initially explore several routes at once. Some paths may be longer or less efficient, yet over time the majority of traffic converges on the shortest connection. This shift occurs because ants following shorter paths return more quickly, reinforcing those trails with stronger pheromone signals. Gradually, weaker trails fade as fewer ants use them, leaving behind a streamlined route shaped by collective exploration. The process resembles problem solving carried out by an entire colony rather than by a single individual. Researchers have used these behaviors to develop algorithms that help optimize networks in fields ranging from telecommunications to transportation, demonstrating how patterns observed in ants can inform human technology. The concept of swarm intelligence emerges naturally from these observations. Instead of relying on centralized control, ants operate through local interactions that scale into coordinated outcomes. Each ant responds only to the information immediately available: pheromone intensity, antennae contact, environmental cues. Yet together they create systems capable of adapting to changing conditions. Computer scientists studying these patterns have developed models known as ant colony optimization algorithms, which simulate the way ants reinforce successful paths while allowing less efficient ones to disappear. These models help solve complex problems such as scheduling, route planning, and resource distribution, illustrating how biological systems inspire solutions beyond the natural world. Watching ants navigate obstacles provides a more tangible sense of this intelligence in action. When a fallen branch blocks a familiar trail, foragers spread outward, testing alternative routes until a new path stabilizes. No ant announces the solution. Instead, successful detours attract more traffic through reinforcement. Over time, the colony reshapes its movement patterns without any visible disruption. The same principles guide traffic flow within dense streams of ants. Individuals adjust their speed and direction subtly to avoid collisions, forming lanes that allow two-way movement even in narrow spaces. These lanes appear spontaneously, shaped by simple behavioral rules that balance efficiency with flexibility. Observing such flows invites comparisons to the movement of crowds or vehicles, yet ants achieve this coordination without signals recognizable to human senses. The study of ant navigation extends into laboratory experiments, where researchers create artificial mazes or shifting environments. In one experiment, ants were presented with two paths to a food source, one shorter and one longer. Initially, ants explored both routes randomly, but within hours the shorter path dominated as pheromone reinforcement accumulated. When the shorter path was suddenly blocked, ants redistributed themselves quickly, establishing a new optimal route without hesitation. This adaptability highlights the resilience of decentralized systems, where solutions emerge not from fixed plans, but from ongoing interaction with the environment. Even the concept of memory in ants differs from human expectations. Rather than storing detailed maps in their minds, ants rely on distributed memory embedded in pheromone trails and collective experience. The colony remembers through patterns of movement rather than through individual recollection. A worker may follow a trail laid by others without knowing who created it or why, yet the result reflects shared knowledge accumulated over time. This form of memory allows colonies to adapt quickly to changing landscapes, as new information spreads through chemical signals rather than through direct instruction. The intellectual fascination of ant navigation lies not in any single behavior, but in the interplay between individual simplicity and collective complexity. Each ant follows a limited set of rules shaped by evolution, yet when thousands act together, they solve problems that appear sophisticated from a human perspective. Observing this process encourages a broader understanding of intelligence as something that can emerge from interaction rather than from centralized thought. The desert ant navigating by polarized sunlight, the forager reinforcing a successful trail, and the swarm adjusting its routes in response to obstacles all reveal a world where solutions arise through cooperation woven into every step. Across landscapes shaped by trails and hidden agriculture, ant societies do not exist in isolation, and the interactions between neighboring colonies reveal another layer of complexity that unfolds quietly yet persistently. Territorial boundaries form where foraging routes intersect, and when workers from different colonies meet, subtle differences in chemical identity determine the outcome. Sometimes ants pass one another with little reaction, especially when resources are abundant, but in other moments a brief contact between antennae triggers defensive behavior that spreads outward through alarm pheromones. These encounters rarely resemble chaotic battles. Instead, they unfold as waves of movement along invisible borders, where workers push and pull, testing the limits of territory without seeking unnecessary risk. Observers watching pavement ants in urban environments often notice shifting lines of conflict that appear during warmer months, small gatherings where ants grapple, briefly before dispersing again. Over time, these interactions establish stable boundaries that reduce constant confrontation, allowing neighbouring colonies to coexist within shared environments. Among the more unusual behaviours found in ant ecosystems is the phenomenon sometimes called social parasitism, where certain species rely on others to sustain their colonies. Slave-making ants, for example, raid nearby nests to capture pupae, which later emerge as workers loyal to the raiding colony. The process sounds dramatic when described in human terms, yet within the natural world it reflects another evolutionary strategy shaped by cooperation and adaptation. Raiding parties move quickly and quietly, guided by chemical signals that coordinate their actions. Once inside a rival nest, they carry developing brood back to their own colony, where the young ants integrate seamlessly into existing routines. Scientists studying these interactions have noted that enslaved workers continue performing tasks much as they would in their original colonies, responding to the pheromone environment rather than to memory of origin. This blending of identities challenges human ideas about individuality, revealing how flexible societies can become under different ecological pressures. Beyond interactions between ants themselves, a wide range of parasites and pathogens influence colony life in ways that remain mostly hidden. Fungal infections represent one of the most intriguing examples. Certain species of fungi infect ants by attaching to their exoskeletons and gradually altering their behavior. Infected ants may climb vegetation and clamp onto leaves before dying, creating a platform from which the fungus releases spores. While this phenomenon often captures public imagination, it occurs within a broader context of ecological balance. Colonies respond by isolating infected individuals, grooming one another more frequently, and adjusting internal organization to reduce spread. Researchers have observed ants carrying infected nestmates away from central chambers, demonstrating how hygiene and social behavior help limit outbreaks. Parasites therefore become part of the ongoing conversation between ants and their environment, shaping evolutionary adaptations without overwhelming the colony's resilience. Strange alliances also form between ants and plants, creating partnerships that benefit both participants. In certain tropical regions, acacia trees provide hollow thorns filled with nutrient-rich structures known as Beltian bodies, offering food and shelter to specific ant species. In return, the ants defend the tree against herbivores and competing vegetation, patrolling leaves and attacking insects that attempt to feed on them. Watching these interactions reveals a subtle coordination where ants respond to chemical signals released by damaged plants, increasing defensive activity precisely where it is needed. The tree gains protection without expending energy on physical defenses, while the ants secure a reliable habitat integrated into their daily routines. Similar relationships appear in other ecosystems, where plants produce nectar outside of flowers to attract ants that deter predators, illustrating how cooperation extends beyond the boundaries of species. Ants themselves also become prey within larger food webs. contributing to the balance of ecosystems that sustain countless other organisms. Birds often follow army ant migrations, capturing insects flushed from hiding by the advancing swarm. Lizards and spiders wait near trails, relying on predictable movement patterns to secure meals. Even mammals such as anteaters and pangolins specialize in feeding on ants, their bodies adapted to break open nests and consume large numbers of workers in a single visit. These interactions rarely threaten the long-term survival of ant colonies because their populations are distributed across vast networks of nests and territories. Instead, predation becomes another factor shaping behavior, encouraging ants to develop defensive strategies ranging from stings and chemical sprays to coordinated swarming responses that overwhelm intruders through sheer numbers. Observing the role of ants within these interconnected relationships reveals a world where conflict and cooperation exist side by side without clear boundaries between them. Territorial disputes, parasitic strategies, fungal infections, and alliances with plants all contribute to the dynamic balance of ecosystems. Each interaction influences how colonies grow, adapt, and persist across generations. Rather than dramatic confrontations, these processes unfold through gradual adjustments shaped by environmental conditions and chemical communication. The presence of predators encourages vigilance, while partnerships with plants provide stability, creating a landscape where ants participate in a network of relationships far more intricate than a single colony could represent on its own. As the view widens beyond individual colonies and the interactions between neighbouring species, a larger pattern begins to emerge, one that stretches across entire landscapes and unfolds over timescales far longer than any single ant could experience. Every tunnel carved beneath the soil contributes to subtle changes in the structure of the ground itself. When ants excavate their nests, they loosen compacted earth, allowing air and water to move more freely through layers that might otherwise remain dense and impermeable. Rain sinks deeper, roots encounter pockets of oxygen, and microorganisms find new pathways through spaces shaped by countless grains carried upward in the mandibles of workers. Scientists measuring soil near long-established nests often find increased nutrient levels compared to surrounding areas, evidence that ants act as quiet engineers shaping the environment in ways that ripple outward through plant growth and microbial activity. The movement of soil is not random but influenced by the needs of the colony. Workers select particles based on size and texture, depositing coarser grains near entrances and distributing finer material within chambers. Over time, this sorting alters the composition of the ground, creating microhabitats where seeds germinate more easily or where moisture lingers longer after rainfall. In grasslands, patches of earth surrounding ant nests may support different plant species than the surrounding landscape, forming small islands of biodiversity that reflect the ongoing presence of underground activity. Observing these changes requires patience as they unfold gradually, yet their cumulative effect reshapes entire ecosystems. Seed dispersal represents another subtle yet powerful influence ants exert on the natural world. Many plants produce seeds equipped with nutrient-rich appendages known as elaiosomes, structures evolved specifically to attract ants. Workers carry these seeds back to their nests, drawn by the energy stored within the appendage. Once the elaosome is consumed, the remaining seed is often discarded in refuse piles or nutrient-rich soil near the nest, creating ideal conditions for germination. This process, known as myrmecochory, links the life cycles of ants and plants in ways that shape the distribution of forests and meadows. Over thousands of years, plants that rely on ants for dispersal have evolved characteristics that encourage this partnership, demonstrating how interactions at the scale of individual foragers can influence the composition of entire plant communities. In some regions, the absence of ants leads to noticeable changes in vegetation patterns, highlighting how deeply integrated these insects are within ecological networks. Ants also influence plant evolution through defensive alliances that extend beyond simple seed transport. As described earlier, certain plants provide nectar or shelter in exchange for protection against herbivores. These relationships create selective pressures that shape the development of thorns, extrafloral nectaries, and other adaptations designed to attract partners. The result is a landscape where plant architecture reflects the presence of ants, with branches shaped to accommodate patrol routes and chemical signals triggering defensive responses. Researchers studying tropical ecosystems have observed that when ant populations decline, herbivore damage increases, altering the balance of species within the forest. The absence of ants allows certain insects to multiply unchecked, demonstrating how even small changes in ant activity can cascade through food webs. Nutrient cycling further illustrates the role of ants as the architects of the earth. As foragers gather organic material from the surface, dead insects, plant fragments, and fungal spores, they transport these resources into the soil, where decomposition accelerates within the stable environment of the nest. Microbial communities thrive in these nutrient-rich chambers, breaking down matter into forms accessible to plants. Over time, abandoned nests become hotspots of fertility, supporting new growth that differs from surrounding areas. In tropical forests, researchers have found that tree seedlings often cluster near former ant nests, taking advantage of the enriched soil left behind. This pattern reveals how the life cycle of a colony continues to shape the landscape long after the ants themselves have moved on. The influence of ants extends even to larger animals, many of which rely indirectly on the changes ants create. Birds searching for insects may find more prey in areas where ant activity has altered soil composition. Mammals grazing on vegetation benefit from the increased diversity of plants that grow near nests. Even the movement of water across landscapes can shift as ant mounds redirect rainfall or create channels that slow erosion. These interactions demonstrate how the collective actions of millions of tiny individuals accumulate into forces capable of shaping ecosystems on a planetary scale. Viewing ants through this broader lens transforms the earlier image of hidden colonies beneath our feet into something more expansive. The trails crossing sidewalks, the nests hidden in forests, and the specialized behaviors described in earlier chapters all contribute to a network of ecological processes that sustain life far beyond the boundaries of any single colony. Ants do not simply exist within ecosystems. They help build and maintain them, influencing soil chemistry, plant distribution, and the balance between species. Their presence weaves together layers of interaction that extend from microscopic bacteria to towering trees, reminding us that the smallest creatures can play roles far larger than their size suggests. Seen from the perspective of soil, forests, and the shifting patterns of entire ecosystems, the life of a single ant begins to feel brief and almost weightless compared to the continuity of the colony that surrounds it. A worker may live only a few weeks or months depending on species and environment, spending its early days tending brood deep within the nest, before gradually moving outward into the risks of foraging. Its lifespan is shaped by exposure to predators, climate, and the wear of constant labour. Yet within that short span, the worker contributes to a structure that may endure for years, sometimes decades, outlasting countless individual lives that pass through its chambers. Queens, by contrast, exist on an entirely different scale of time. Some species have queens known to live more than 20 years, continuing to produce eggs long after the workers that first built the nest have disappeared. This disparity between individual lifespan and collective persistence reveals a biological rhythm that stretches beyond any single ant's awareness, creating a system where continuity emerges from constant renewal. Colonies often behave as though they exist outside the normal boundaries of individual life, maintaining identity through shared scent profiles and ongoing reproduction. As older workers die and new ones emerge, the colony remains recognizable, its patterns of movement and architecture evolving gradually without abrupt change. Observers returning to the same nest year after year may notice subtle differences in entrance size or foraging routes, yet the colony itself persists as a stable presence within the landscape. Seasonal cycles play a central role in shaping these long-term patterns. In temperate regions, activity rises and falls with changes in temperature and daylight. During colder months, many species retreat deeper into their nests, slowing metabolism and reducing foraging to conserve energy. Brood development may pause or proceed at a slower pace, aligning the emergence of new workers with the arrival of spring when food becomes more abundant. As warmth returns, trails reappear, and the colony expands outward again, reconnecting with the broader environment described in earlier chapters. These cycles create a rhythm that feels almost tidal, with phases of quiet consolidation followed by periods of growth and exploration. The timing of reproductive events reflects this seasonal awareness. Winged males and queens develop gradually within the nest, waiting for precise environmental cues before emerging for nuptial flights. The synchronization of these flights across multiple colonies increases the likelihood of successful mating, demonstrating how large-scale patterns can arise from shared responses to climate and light. Once fertilized queens establish new nests, the process of colony formation begins anew, linking generations through a continuous chain of reproduction that extends far beyond any individual lifespan. The persistence of colonies becomes even more striking when viewed at the scale of supercolonies, vast networks of nests connected through cooperation rather than competition. Argentine ants offer one of the most remarkable examples, forming interconnected populations that stretch across thousands of kilometers. Within these supercolonies, ants from distant nests recognize one another as allies rather than rivals, sharing resources and maintaining trails that span entire regions. Genetic studies suggest that these expansive systems originated from small founding populations that spread gradually through human transportation and environmental change, demonstrating how modern landscapes influence the evolution of collective behavior. Watching ants from different nests interact peacefully challenges assumptions about territorial conflict, revealing a form of social organization that extends beyond local boundaries. Time also shapes the internal structure of colonies in quieter ways. The progression of workers through different roles described earlier creates overlapping generations that maintain continuity even as individuals age and disappear. Young ants learn patterns of movement and interaction by participating in established routines, inheriting knowledge embedded in the chemical environment rather than through direct teaching. Trails, grooming behaviors, and architectural adjustments carry the memory of past experiences, allowing the colony to adapt gradually without needing to remember specific events. Researchers observing long-lived colonies have documented how nests shift locations slowly over years, expanding into new areas while abandoning older chambers that become less suitable. This gradual migration reflects an ongoing dialogue between colony and environment, shaped by changes in soil composition, vegetation, and competition from neighbouring species. The passage of time therefore becomes visible not through dramatic transformations but through subtle adjustments that accumulate across seasons and decades. Even the architecture of nests reflects this layered history, with older tunnels reinforcing newer ones and abandoned chambers filling with enriched soil that influences future plant growth. From a broader perspective, the persistence of ant colonies mirrors patterns seen in larger biological systems, where individual components cycle rapidly while the overall structure endures. The contrast between the fleeting life of a worker and the longevity of a queen highlights how evolution has distributed roles to balance renewal and stability. Workers carry the risks of exploration and labour, ensuring that the colony can respond quickly to environmental change, while queens provide continuity through reproduction. Together, these roles create a system capable of existing far longer than any single participant, a living process that unfolds across generations without interruption. As colonies persist across decades and even centuries, their presence begins to overlap more closely with human landscapes, shaping a relationship that often goes unnoticed despite its constant proximity. Pavement ants navigating between cracks in sidewalks or beneath the edges of buildings demonstrate how adaptable these insects can be when confronted with environments built almost entirely from artificial materials. Concrete, asphalt, and brick may appear inhospitable compared to soil or forest floor, yet they provide warmth, shelter, and countless narrow spaces ideal for nesting. Heat absorbed by roads during the day radiates slowly into the evening, extending the active hours of ants that might otherwise retreat earlier. Tiny openings left by shifting ground or construction create corridors that connect hidden nests beneath streets, forming networks that mirror the underground tunnels described earlier, but shaped by human design rather than natural terrain. Watching ants move across a city plaza reveals the same patterns of communication and cooperation seen in forests and deserts, reminding us that their behavior adapts to context without losing its underlying rhythm. Urban environments introduce new challenges as well as opportunities. Food sources become unpredictable, scattered across sidewalks and waste areas rather than concentrated in natural patches. Ants respond by expanding their foraging strategies, exploring wider territories, and forming flexible trails that adjust quickly to changing conditions. Studies of city-dwelling ants have shown that some species shift their activity patterns to avoid peak human movement, emerging at quieter times when vibrations and disturbances decrease. Others adapt to artificial lighting, extending their foraging into hours that would normally be too dark to navigate. These adjustments highlight the resilience of ant societies, capable of integrating unfamiliar elements into their routines without disrupting the collective organization that sustains them. Agriculture presents another intersection between ants and human activity, one shaped by both cooperation and tension. In crop fields, ants may protect certain plants by preying on herbivorous insects, reducing the need for chemical pesticides. Farmers observing natural pest control sometimes encourage ant populations, recognizing their role as allies in maintaining ecological balance. Yet ants can also complicate agricultural systems by protecting sap-feeding insects such as aphids, whose honeydew provides a valuable resource for the colony. This dual role reflects the broader complexity of ant behavior, where actions beneficial in one context may become challenges in another. Understanding these dynamics requires observing ants not as isolated pests, but as participants in larger ecological networks shaped by both natural and human influences. climate change introduces additional pressures that reshape how ants interact with the world around them. Rising temperatures influence foraging patterns, reproductive cycles, and the distribution of species across continents. Some ants expand their ranges into regions that were once too cold, establishing new colonies in environments shaped by human infrastructure. Urban heat islands, created by concentrated buildings and reduced vegetation, provide microclimates where certain species thrive, even as surrounding landscapes shift. Researchers tracking these changes have noted that ants often serve as indicators of broader ecological transformation, their presence revealing subtle shifts in soil temperature, moisture, and plant communities. Observing how colonies adjust to these changes offers insight into the resilience of social systems facing environmental uncertainty. Human expansion has inadvertently created pathways for ants to travel across oceans and continents. Shipping routes, trade networks, and global transportation allow species to establish themselves far from their original habitats, sometimes forming invasive populations that reshape local ecosystems. Argentine ants, for instance, have spread widely through urban and agricultural regions, forming vast supercolonies that displace native species through sheer numbers and cooperation. These expansions illustrate how human activity intersects with evolutionary strategies, amplifying certain behaviors while challenging others. Despite the potential for disruption, many ant species coexist peacefully alongside human communities, occupying niches that remain largely invisible to those passing above. Observing ants in urban gardens or along the edges of buildings reveals a quiet continuity with the natural systems described earlier. Trails weave through planters, nests form beneath stones, and workers carry seeds or fragments of food across surfaces shaped by human hands. Even in densely populated areas, ants maintain the same rhythms of cooperation, communication, and adaptation that define their existence in forests and deserts. The boundary between natural and artificial environments becomes less distinct when viewed from the perspective of ants, whose scale allows them to integrate seamlessly into spaces humans rarely consider as habitats. This coexistence invites reflection on how closely intertwined human and ant worlds have become. Our structures provide shelter and warmth, while ants contribute to soil health, pest control, and the ongoing cycles of decomposition that sustain life around us. The presence of ants in cities and farms does not represent an invasion, so much as an extension of their long history of adapting to changing landscapes. As human expansion continues to reshape ecosystems, ants remain among the most flexible participants, capable of thriving in environments that blend natural processes with technological development. As ants continue to thrive within cities, farms, and wild landscapes alike, their behavior invites a deeper question that reaches beyond biology into the nature of intelligence itself. Watching a trail form along the edge of a building or across a forest floor reveals patterns that appear deliberate, almost planned, yet no individual ant holds an overview of the system it helps create. Decision-making unfolds through countless local interactions, each worker responding to chemical signals, environmental cues, and brief encounters with nestmates. When a colony faces multiple options, several possible paths to food, different sites for a new nest, or shifting conditions within its territory, the outcome emerges gradually rather than through command. Scouts explore independently, gathering information that spreads through pheromone reinforcement. Over time, certain choices gain momentum as more ants support them, creating a consensus that feels intentional even though it arises from decentralized processes. This form of collective decision-making challenges traditional ideas about leadership and hierarchy, suggesting that intelligence can emerge from cooperation rather than from a central mind. Collective problem-solving becomes especially visible when ants encounter obstacles. In controlled experiments, researchers place barriers between nests and food sources, forcing colonies to adapt. At first, workers scatter in multiple directions, testing possible routes with no apparent coordination. Gradually, successful paths attract more traffic as returning ants reinforce them with pheromones, while inefficient routes fade into disuse. The colony solves the problem not by analysing every possibility, but by allowing many small experiments to occur simultaneously. Each ant contributes a fragment of information, and the combined effect produces solutions that often rival those designed by human engineers. This approach reflects a balance between exploration and efficiency, where randomness and reinforcement coexist to generate adaptive behaviour. Scientists observing these dynamics have begun to draw parallels between ant colonies and neural networks, noting how simple units interacting through feedback loops can produce complex outcomes. The influence of ant behaviour extends beyond natural ecosystems into fields such as robotics and artificial intelligence. Engineers seeking to design machines capable of navigating uncertain environments often look to ants for inspiration. Swarm robotics, for example, explores how multiple simple robots can cooperate to perform tasks without centralized control, mirroring the way ants coordinate foraging or construction. Algorithms based on ant trail formation help optimize routes for delivery systems, data networks, and transportation planning. In these models, virtual ants explore possible solutions, leaving digital traces that guide others toward efficient outcomes. Over time, the strongest solutions emerge through reinforcement, reflecting the same principles observed in real colonies. The connection between biology and technology illustrates how studying ants can reveal new approaches to solving complex problems, not by imitating individual intelligence, but by embracing collective processes. The concept of biological algorithms inspired by ants highlights the intersection between natural behavior and computational thinking. Ant colony optimization, a technique used in computer science, models how pheromone trails evolve over time to find optimal solutions within complex systems. By simulating the way ants reinforce successful paths, researchers develop algorithms capable of handling challenges that require flexibility and adaptability. These methods have been applied to tasks ranging from scheduling airline routes to designing communication networks, demonstrating how patterns observed in small insects can inform large-scale human innovation. The elegance of these algorithms lies in their simplicity. Rather than relying on exhaustive calculation, they allow solutions to emerge through iterative exploration, much like a colony adjusting its trails in response to changing conditions. Observing ants through this lens reveals that intelligence may not always reside within individual minds, but can arise from interactions between many agents responding to shared signals. A single ant navigating a path appears limited in its awareness, yet the colony as a whole behaves as though it possesses memory, foresight, and adaptability. This perspective encourages a re-examination of how intelligence is defined, shifting focus from isolated cognition to distributed systems capable of learning through experience. Researchers studying ant colonies often describe them as living networks, where information flows through pheromones and contact rather than through centralized processing. The resulting behavior reflects a form of problem-solving grounded in cooperation, one that evolves continuously as conditions change. Watching a colony adjust its trails after a sudden disturbance or reorganize labor when resources fluctuate offers a quiet demonstration of this distributed intelligence in action. Ants do not debate or deliberate in the human sense, yet their responses to challenges reveal patterns that feel thoughtful when observed from afar. Each worker follows simple rules shaped by evolution, but together they generate solutions that appear sophisticated. This balance between individual simplicity and collective complexity forms the intellectual heart of their story, inviting reflection on how systems composed of many small parts can achieve outcomes greater than the sum of their components. Seen through the lens of collective intelligence and quiet cooperation, the world of ants begins to fold back toward the everyday landscapes where the story first unfolded, revealing how much of their existence continues beyond human attention. Pavement cracks, forest floors, fields, and deserts all hold the same underlying continuity. Colonies expanding and contracting, workers moving through trails that appear briefly and fade again, and nests reshaping themselves grain by grain beneath the surface. The idea of hidden civilizations is no longer an abstract metaphor but a literal description of life unfolding in parallel to our own routines. While people cross sidewalks or walk through parks, ants navigate routes established through countless small decisions, adjusting constantly to temperature, moisture, and the availability of resources. Their presence remains subtle, rarely demanding notice, yet it persists as a steady influence shaping the environments described throughout this journey. Colonies continue unseen not because they avoid visibility, but because their scale blends seamlessly into the texture of the world around us. A mound of soil at the edge of a path may hold thousands of individuals engaged in tasks that began long before the moment of observation and will continue long afterward. Beneath tree roots, chambers expand slowly, responding to shifts in humidity and the growth of nearby plants. In urban spaces, nests form beneath stones or along the foundations of buildings, integrating human structures into their own architecture. The rhythm of activity described earlier, the exchange of food, the grooming of nestmates, the construction of tunnels, does not end with a single season or generation. Instead, it flows forward through overlapping cycles of reproduction and labor, creating continuity that outlasts individual lives. Observers returning to the same locations over years often find new nests where old ones once stood, evidence of a process that evolves gradually without dramatic interruption. Ants shape the earth quietly, their influence distributed across millions of colonies that collectively alter soil, vegetation, and ecological balance. The tunnels carved underground allow air and water to penetrate deeper layers, supporting plant growth that might otherwise struggle in compacted soil. Seeds carried by workers find new places to germinate, expanding forests and meadows through subtle acts of transport. Even abandoned nests leave behind enriched ground that supports future life, illustrating how the legacy of a colony continues long after its members have moved on. These processes unfold continuously, rarely attracting attention because they occur at a scale that feels ordinary rather than spectacular. Yet when viewed together, they reveal a pattern of quiet transformation that extends across continents. The persistence of ants within human environments reflects their ability to adapt without disrupting the larger balance of ecosystems. In cities, their trails weave between buildings and gardens, adjusting to artificial light and shifting temperatures. In agricultural landscapes, they participate in cycles of growth and decay that mirror natural systems despite the presence of machinery and cultivated crops. The adaptability described throughout earlier chapters becomes most evident here. where ants integrate seamlessly into spaces shaped by human activity, while maintaining the same cooperative behaviours that define their existence in wild habitats. This coexistence highlights how deeply embedded ants are within the fabric of life on Earth, acting not as invaders, but as constant participants in processes that sustain ecosystems. Observing ants with patience reveals that the boundaries between past and present blur when viewed from the perspective of colony life. The evolutionary journey from ancient wasps to modern superorganisms continues through each new generation, carried forward by queens that live for decades and workers that renew the colony through continuous labour. Trails appear where resources emerge and vanish when conditions change, leaving behind faint traces that reflect a history of movement rather than a fixed plan. The intelligence described earlier, distributed, adaptive, and collective, remains active at every moment, shaping decisions that ripple outward through the colony and into the surrounding environment. Watching ants move across a surface, one begins to notice how their actions align with patterns described throughout this narrative. Communication through scent, cooperation through shared tasks, and adaptation through constant interaction with the world. The hidden civilization introduced at the beginning of the story becomes visible not through dramatic revelation, but through accumulated understanding. Each chapter of observation, from anatomy and architecture to agriculture and collective intelligence, reveals another layer of a system that persists quietly beneath daily life. Ants do not announce their presence with noise or spectacle. They continue their work regardless of whether anyone notices, contributing to processes that shape soil, forests, and even the patterns of human technology inspired by their behaviour. This continuity offers a final perspective grounded not in symbolism but in observation. The world continues beneath us, shaped by organisms that measure time differently and respond to challenges through cooperation rather than control. Colonies expand, divide, and adapt as environments shift, carrying forward patterns refined over millions of years. Trails cross familiar ground, appearing and fading in cycles that mirror the broader rhythms of ecosystems. The quiet presence of ants reminds us that complexity often exists at scales too small to dominate attention, yet powerful enough to influence the world in lasting ways.